Section 1. You will hear a woman booking a bicycle tour over the phone. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4 on page 163. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Global Bicycle Tours. May I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
The man answers the phone. Global Bicycle Tours. So the word global has been written at the top of the form. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Global Bicycle Tours. May I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
Which tour were you interested in? We have the River Valley Tour coming up in June and the Mountain Tour in July.
The River Valley tour is in June. I thought it was in May.
It actually takes place the first week of June.
Oh, I see. Well, I can still do that. The River Valley tour is the one I want.
Splendid. Just let me take your information. May I have your name, please?
Carla Schmidt. That's Carla with a K, not a C. Karla.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Address?
Do you need a street address, or can I give you my post office box?
A post office box is fine.
It's P.O. Box 257, Manchester.
Thank you. Okay, next. Will you be bringing your own bicycle, or do you want to rent one from us?
I'll bring my own.
Excellent. Now, we provide all the meals, so we need to know if you have any dietary restrictions.
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I mean, if there's any food you can't eat. Some people have food allergies or are vegetarian or have to avoid dairy products, things like that.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I never eat meat.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10 on page 163. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
All right, I'll make a note of that. Now, the total cost of the tour is $750.
That much?
The price includes everything. Food, hotel, transportation, everything.
Everything?
Yes, everything. The only other thing is you'll want to tip the tour guide. We usually recommend 5% of the total tour cost.
A 5% tip. I guess that's reasonable.
In order to reserve your space on the tour, I'll need a 30% deposit.
Do you need that right away?
We generally ask for the deposit at least 4 weeks before the tour begins. The River Valley tour begins, 6 weeks from now. So you'll need to pay the deposit in 2 weeks.
I think I can do that. I wonder if you could tell me something. How will our luggage be transported? Do we carry it on our bicycles?
No, you leave that to us. We have a van that carries your luggage from hotel to hotel each day, so you don't have to worry about it.
Great. I have a luggage rack for my bike, but I guess I won't have to bring that.
No, you won't. But there are a few items we recommend that you bring. We can't control the weather, so you should bring a raincoat or rain gear.
Yes, that's a good idea. And I should have my own spare tyre too, shouldn't I?
Actually, you don't need that, as our guide always carries some. And of course, you won't need maps either, since our guide has the route all planned.
What about a water bottle? I'll need that, won't I?
Yes, you should definitely have a water bottle. A camera would be a good idea too, since that tour goes through some very scenic areas.
I have a guidebook of that area. I wonder if I should bring it along.
We don't recommend guidebooks. It would just be extra weight, and the tour guide knows a great deal about the area.
Yes, I see. Is there anything else I need to know?
I think we've covered the important points. I'll send you a tour brochure, and you can call again if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a radio presenter interviewing a man about the Sydney Harbour Bridge. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully to the interview and answer questions 11 to 16.
Well, good morning again, everyone, and welcome to Perspective, the weekly New South Wales radio programme on subjects of general interest from our local area. Today I have in the studio Mr. George Simmons. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Anne.
So what are you going to talk to us about today, George?
Well, for people from New South Wales, and particularly Sydney, this will be of great interest, I hope. I'm going to tell you a little about Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Wow, that'll be so interesting.
I think so. To start with, I'd like to tell you a little about the size of the bridge. The arch span is 503 metres, and the weight of the steel arch is 39,000 tonnes. The summit is 134 metres above mean sea level, though it can actually increase by as much as 18 centimetres on hot days, as the result of steel expanding in heat. The two pairs of pylons at each end are about 89 metres high, and are made of concrete and granite. The steel used for the bridge was largely imported. About 79% came from the United Kingdom, but the rest was Australian-made. The granite was quarried in Moruya down the coast, and the concrete is also Australian.
So most of the steel used to make our great bridge actually came from England?
Yes, I'm afraid so. However, the workforce were all Aussie.
Thank God for that. When was the bridge actually built?
The bridge was opened in 1932, but work first began in 1924 with the construction of the bridge approaches and spans, with two separate teams building the arch on each side working towards each other. The arch was successfully joined on August the 19th, 1930. I'm afraid that working practices weren't very fair in those days, and the local government demolished 438 homes, which were in the way of the approaches, and as many as 800 families living there were displaced without compensation. The standards of industrial safety were inadequate too. 16 workers died during its construction, mainly from falling off the bridge.
I didn't realise that.
Yes, the bridge was formally opened on the 19th of March 1932 by the Premier of New South Wales, Mr. Jack Lang. When it was opened, it was the longest single-span steel arch bridge in the world, and it was one of the greatest engineering masterpieces of its time. Several songs were also composed in advance for the occasion, but these have now largely been lost or forgotten. However, 3 postage stamps were issued to commemorate the opening of the bridge, and these still exist. One of these stamps, with a face value of 5 shillings, is now worth several $100s today.
You now have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the interview and answer questions 17 to 20.
So that's the history of the bridge. Is the bridge still the same today as when it was built?
No, it's quite different. The basic structure is the same, of course. Originally, the bridge was constructed to carry a road, 2 sets of tram lines and railways. In 1957, the 2 tram lines were removed when Sydney abolished its trams, thus giving the bridge 2 more traffic lanes. Today it carries 8 traffic lanes, 2 railroad lanes and a footpath along its eastern side. One of the eastern traffic lanes is now a dedicated bus lane. The bridge is often crowded, and in 1992 the harbour tunnel was opened to help carry the traffic load. More than 160,000 vehicles cross the bridge each day. Before the harbour tunnel was opened, this figure was as high as 182,000, and would be much higher today if it were not for the tunnel. Pedestrians, horses and push bikes are not allowed on the bridge anymore.
Wow! The bridge actually carries that much?
Oh yes. Actually, before the harbour bridge opened, it was completely packed with railway carriages, trams and buses to stress test its load-bearing capacity. While it has had many traffic jams since, and 500,000 people walked across it on its 50th anniversary, it has probably never been asked to carry that much of a load since.
Amazing! And I suppose the toll for crossing the bridge has changed a bit too.
I'm afraid so. The initial toll charged for a car was 6 pence, while a horse and rider were charged 3 pence. Today the toll costs $3, but is only charged when travelling to the south as an efficiency measure to speed up traffic flow.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a lecturer and 2 horticulture students who are preparing a display for a science fair. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Good morning, Annie. Tony, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Well, tell me what you have here.
We thought we'd look at different methods of hydroculture.
Uh-huh.
In the true hydroponics method, the roots are bathed with water and nutrient solution, while support for the plant must be provided above the container.
And alternatively?
Alternatively, the plants can grow with their roots in a substratum, such as sand, vermiculite, or LECA granules.
LECA stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate, and vermiculite is...
Thank you, Tony. I know what vermiculite is, but you should be prepared to give details about all these things to the visitors. Can you explain what the advantage of LECA is over traditional soil?
It's a natural product, manufactured from clay. It's colorful, lightweight, and perfect for allergy sufferers.
That's right. Now tell me why.
Because it's clean and hygienic, bacteria and soil diseases don't get a chance.
Well, you could say that on this chart here, ideal for household plants.
And we'll point out that the growing medium itself makes no contribution to feeding, which is provided in solution with the water.
Good. Now tell me what you've got here.
This is a simple version of the first method, using a wide-neck jar which we've filled with water and nutrients, leaving space at the top. As the roots need to be in darkness, We'll cover the sides of the glass with brown paper later.
How did you get the plant through the cork?
We made a hole through the center and cut the cork in half so we could fit it around the plant stem, and we padded the hole with cotton wool.
Well, that's a good demonstration of the principle involved, and ideal for a houseplant, but many people will want to see a wider application. What about more plants?
We haven't quite finished the preparation yet, but over here you can see a bigger container. In fact, any wide container can be used, with the nutrient solution in the bottom, airspace above, and then we've made a rigid lid, and we've covered that with a layer of litter.
What have you used for litter?
We've used wood shavings.
Untreated?
Definitely. That's most important. You can use a variety of materials for litter, but obviously nothing toxic, and treated timber contains some nasty chemicals. So, if you're using sawdust or wood shavings, they have to be from natural timber.
A good point.
Yes, we'll make a note of that when we list possible ingredients for litter.
Be sure to explain the purpose of the rigid lid. It's wire mesh, isn't it? And why the litter layer is important too.
Well, the mesh is just a platform to keep the litter out of the water, and the primary function of the litter is to exclude light from the root space.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
What you have so far is ideal for the home or office, but what about commercial applications?
Well, we're going to demonstrate the nutrient film technique, which is popular with some commercial growers, particularly for the cultivation of crops such as runner beans and tomatoes. Producers would really like to see some innovation in the cultivation of potatoes and yams too, but obviously, this technique is only suitable for those crops which grow above ground.
What about peas?
Well, we found peas were awfully tricky to grow using this method, although we're still unsure as to the reason.
Where's the exhibit? I don't see it anywhere.
Well, that's because we haven't finished it yet, because we're going to have to procure some mature plants first. We didn't think far enough ahead to have started them off earlier, and when we do get them, we'll have to handle them carefully.
Yes, because when our model is finished, you'll see how the plants are held in position by a plastic tube which almost encloses them completely and is quite loosely fastened around the stems.
Yes. And the feeding or watering system?
Well, it's a bit different. On a large scale like this, you need to have the food solution trickle down through the tubes.
Yes, but the solution must also be rich in oxygen.
And what? It just bathes the roots?
That's one way of doing it.
What's the other way?
You can have the solution moistening a substratum of rock wool at the bottom of the container.
Rock wool?
It's the same as mineral wool. You know, a lightweight fibrous material, the kind of thing used for insulation. Or you can use a layer of paper fiber.
Oh, yes. Something that has the capacity to absorb the solution, right?
Well, you do need to experiment a little. For example, we tried coconut fiber,
but it just didn't have the properties we were looking for.
I see.
In our display, you'll only see the basics, the kind of thing that can be done at home in the backyard. But commercial enterprises do need a lot more equipment, and the media used in substrata are constantly changing as new developments are made. The cost of upgrading is ongoing.
And there's always the potential of outright failure when changing systems from one you know and understand to an innovative one.
Of course, there's no room for guesswork in business. You have to try to get everything right first time.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4 on page 116. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about the solar eclipse in history. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
Good evening, and welcome to this month's Observatory Club lecture. I'm Donald Mackey, and I'm here to talk to you about the solar eclipse in history. 1,000 years ago, a total eclipse of the sun was a terrifying religious experience. But these days, an eclipse is more likely to be viewed as a tourist attraction than as a scientific or spiritual event. People will travel literally miles to be in the right place at the right time to get the best view of their eclipse. Well, what exactly causes a solar eclipse when the world goes dark for a few minutes in the middle of the day? Scientifically speaking, the dark spot itself is easy to explain. It's the shadow of the moon streaking across the Earth. This happens every year or two, each time along a different, and to all intents and purposes, a seemingly random piece of the globe. In the past, people often interpreted an eclipse as a danger signal heralding disaster, and in fact the Chinese were so disturbed by these events that they included among their gods one whose job it was to prevent eclipses. But whether or not you're superstitious or take a purely scientific view, our earthly eclipses are special in three ways. Firstly, there can be no doubt that they're very beautiful. It's as if a deep blue curtain had fallen over the daytime sky as the sun becomes a black void surrounded by the glow of its outer atmosphere. But beyond this, total eclipses possess a second, more compelling beauty in the eyes of us scientists, for they offer a unique opportunity for research. Only during an eclipse can we study the corona and other dim things that are normally lost in the sun's glare. And thirdly, they are rare. Even though an eclipse of the sun occurs somewhere on Earth every year or two, if you sit in your garden and wait, it will take 375 years on average for one to come to you. If the moon were any larger, eclipses would become a monthly bore. If it were smaller, they simply would not be possible. The ancient Babylonian priests, who spent a fair bit of time staring at the sky, had already noted that there was an 18-year pattern in their occurrence, but they didn't have the mathematics to predict an eclipse accurately.
In the second part, the speaker talks about a number of scientists. Look at questions 37 to 40. Now listen carefully and complete the table.
It was Edmund Halley, the English astronomer, who knew his maths well enough to predict the return of the comet, which incidentally bears his name, and in 1715 he became the first person to make an accurate eclipse prediction. This brought eclipses firmly into the scientific domain, and they've since allowed a number of important scientific discoveries to be made. For instance, in the eclipse of 1868, two scientists, Janssen and Lockyer, were observing the Sun's atmosphere, and it was these observations that ultimately led to the discovery of a new element. They named the element helium, after the Greek god of the sun. This was a major find, because helium turned out to be the most common element in the universe after hydrogen. Another great triumph involved Mercury. I'll just put that up on the board for you now. See, there's Mercury, the planet closest to the sun, then Venus, Earth, etc. For centuries, scientists had been unable to understand why Mercury appeared to rotate faster than it should. Some astronomers suggested that there might be an undiscovered planet causing this unusual orbit, and even gave it the name Vulcan. During the eclipse of 1878, an American astronomer, James Watson, thought he'd spotted this so-called lost planet. But, alas for him, he was later obliged to admit that he'd been wrong about Vulcan and withdrew his claim. Then Albert Einstein came on the scene. Einstein suggested that, rather than being wrong about the number of planets, astronomers were actually wrong about gravity. Einstein's theory of relativity, for which he's so famous, disagreed with Newton's law of gravity in just the right way to explain Mercury's odd orbit. He also realized that a definitive test would be possible during the total eclipse of 1919, and this is indeed when his theory was finally proved correct. So there you have several examples of how eclipses have helped to increase our understanding of the universe. And now let's move on to the social aspects, and I think you'll find...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.